All right, I assume we're streaming. Um, Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 16 of Wednesdays with WE. If you're wondering what happened to the usual face that meets you every week, we've had to sneak in a quick live video in the middle of all of WE Raman sir's shooting schedule this week. He's been commentating for India versus New Zealand, and we've caught him just before he catches his flight in a couple of hours. So this week we're going to be talking to WB sir about multiple things. Earlier last month, I think we had this Ask WE segment where a lot of the audience members were able to ask him questions about multiple things happening in cricket. Today is something like that, except we don't have so much time to take all of the audience questions that come in. So we've managed to sort of scribble down a couple of questions that we want WE sir's inputs on. So first of all, let's welcome the man himself. Hi, sir. How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you doing, Lavanya? Good to hear from you.
Good as well. Good as well. How has the India New Zealand series been in the middle of all of the rain?
Much of a damp now, wasn't it? Heavy rains and stuff, not enough cricket played. I think the fans would be terribly disappointed because they are looking forward to some exciting cricket. And of course, also the fans that turned up on the ground, despite their patience, it was not rewarded, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So there's a lot that we have to talk about, including this India New Zealand series. We are recording this on the last day of November, which means we have 4 more episodes technically to go per week in Wednesdays with WE, of which 2 we will dedicate to discussing the year that's been in cricket itself. But today, we're going to put WB sir on the spot about a few questions that are plaguing Indian cricket and world cricket at large. First of all, I don't know if you guys have checked out the older episodes, but please go and check out all of the interview segments, especially that WB sir does every other week, where we've had a number of illustrious guests like Sridharan Sriram, David Gower. Earlier, we've had Dilip Sarkar, Chaminda Vas. Please do go and check out all of these episodes. Why I reference them is because in the latest episode, which is with Sridharan Sriram, you guys talked about Justin Langer and about everything that's happening with him in the Australian scene. So we see that the whole Langer issue has erupted again this week, where he's again gone on a podcast and spoken about how there were whispers behind his back, and maybe just feedback that the boys had was never given to him directly, which is probably what led to some of the ill will that's there in the team right now. You've obviously spoken about this in the previous episode, but so how do you sort of see this panning out this week with Pat Cummins coming out and saying, we're not a bunch of cowards? And lot has been said on both ends. So how do you sort of look at this panning out now?
Always, when two parties have their differences, it's better that they both talk to each other rather than about each other. I think, unfortunately, somehow that has happened. Langer has had his views about the entire episode, and obviously, the players would also respond when they hear or see things that have been quoted by any reporter, or if their former coaches mention something on a podcast. So the response will be there, and that's exactly what has happened. I think, as far as all of them are concerned, I think they should try and say, okay, enough is enough. Let's get on with it and move on in life, because these decisions are taken everywhere across the world. And yes, there might be a little bit of unpleasantness, or even disappointment being expressed in different ways. But that's the long and short of it. Once a decision is being taken by any cricket board, and if they decide to move on, it's better for the individual who's perhaps somewhat sad about the whole affair, to forget it and move on as well. And that's exactly what is required from Justin Langer's point of view. And I think, from the scenes that we saw this morning when the players greeted Langer on the field, because he's taken up a commentating gig, and the way they greeted each other, there's a lot of delight on both sides. So that was very, very evident on the faces. And I think that's what it's all about. Yes, you had your say, all of them have had their say. Now forget it and get on with life.
Absolutely. Now, you've obviously been in the hot seat yourself, isn't it? You've been at the helm of a team that had a lot of eyeballs on it, which was the Indian women's team, among the other coaching gigs that you've had. How do you look at it from maybe Langer's point of view? Do you think the pressure just got to him?
It's not about the pressure. What happens is there's a lot of noise outside the team, and there'll obviously be different views. And 4 years is a long time. And these days, what happens is that the team members are sounded out as to what they think of their association with the coach, either incumbent or the one that's likely to take charge of the team. And that's how things are decided. And as far as the individual who's been a part of the team, if he feels he's done a very good job to the best of his her ability, that's what it's all about. Because at the end of the day, it's about what you can contribute, what you contributed, what difference you made to the team per se, and also to the individuals in the team. And if the others feel differently, if they think the time has come for you to exit, that's about it. There's no point wanting to be there all the time, because a coaching gig has a shelf life. But yes, it'll hurt when the decision taken is definitely not based on cricketing merit, but when all other factors come into play and things are decided. But even then, the important thing is that sports teaches you one thing: it is to take the good with the bad, and obviously to take the victories and the defeats well as well. We got to be graceful all the time. That's what is the essence of having been in sports, and also having been a sports person all these years. So we do tend to develop that mechanism once the decision is taken, and regardless of how you feel personally, you don't come out in public. Generally, at least I wouldn't want to be the one who would wash dirty linen in the public.
Absolutely. I don't know if this is the perfect segue, but as far as washing dirty linen in public is concerned, West Indies has been one country that's had, not country, one sort of one cricket team that's had a lot of this being played out, a lot of its struggles being played out in the public eye. Now, obviously, we see them going back to Test cricket for a bit, and we're seeing another Chandrapal come into the scene as well. Um, a lot of ways we've personally, even in this show, we've spoken about how West Indies is looking at a little bit of a decline from maybe the days of glory that they had before to what they are going through right now. Obviously, because of the big hitters in West Indies, we sort of think that their brilliance would come from T20 cricket. But do you sort of see a revival for West Indies cricket coming from tests, perhaps?
I think one of the biggest problems they've had is the lack of a leader, somebody of the stature and of the quality of Clive Lloyd. Yes, whatever he built on, people capitalized on it much later after his exit from the scene. But again, we'll also have to understand that as far as the West Indies is concerned, there are different nations coming together under one umbrella and playing as a side. Maybe in hindsight, if you look at what all has happened over the last 2 decades, or perhaps even 2 decades and a half, you'd have to probably look at it if whether a trick has been missed on the part of the ICC. They could have perhaps looked at a two-tier test platform wherein they could have made all these Caribbean islands play as individual nations as they do in athletics and various other sports. That could have perhaps been one option. But again, it's always easy to say a lot of things in hindsight. But obviously, what happens in sport is that it's always a case of things having its ups and downs, teams having its ups and downs. And the hope would have been that it's going to be just a matter of time before West Indies regained his lost glory. And that's what it's all about. You try and always look at it positively. And even now, there's been a lot of talent that's been on display as far as cricketers from that particular region is concerned. They've got some fabulous cricketers who have really been making a huge impact on cricket, at least in the T20 format. And perhaps it's a case of them putting their minds, applying their minds better, and also the establishment or the administrators also getting together and ensuring that at the end of the day, it's all about all of them getting together and working towards reviving the past glory of the Caribbean cricket and also the West Indies cricket. The talent is there. It's just a matter of how the talent is managed and how the players are convinced to ensure that they forget all their differences and play together as one particular team in international cricket.
Right, absolutely. And as far as just things coming together is concerned, India also finds itself in the middle of some sort of a rejig, in the sense that we have another World Cup coming up and we're sort of shifting formats in terms of what our priorities are. In that sort of a sense, how did you view this New Zealand series? Do you what sort of an upside did you think India gets out of the games, whatever little cricket that we got in the middle of all of the rain?
There have been a lot of youngsters who displayed their talent. We saw Ashdeep playing in the ODIs after he's done extraordinarily well in the T20 format. Obviously, the progress of all these youngsters will be monitored closely by everybody, by all the stakeholders, especially the team management. And as far as the team management is concerned, they've got to try and ensure that they get their plans going straight away, even though the World Cup is 1 year away. It won't be long before they realize, oh, it's already World Cup time. So they got to try and get things going. They got to get their planning going. Perhaps they have around 20 odd games to play before the World Cup. So they got to try and make the best use possible of these 20 odd games so that they're likely to play in the span of next 12 months before they start their campaign in the World Cup. Yes, there'll be a lot of slots which will require a re-gig, or at least it'll require a kind of uh, at least assessing as to who are the right persons who will fill those slots. So that process has to start now, and maybe starting from the next season onwards, next series rather, they got to try and ensure that they decide on the 20, like I mentioned immediately after the T20 format was played, World Cup was played. So they got to try and see who will be the best 20 that can perhaps make up the squad, or perhaps possibly go on to play in the next couple of years. So that's going to be the priority, the way I look at it. But of course, new selection committee is likely to come into place as well, which means that their thoughts could obviously be different from what it was in the case of their predecessors. So they got to have a huddle very quickly, the team management and the new selectors, and then decide on the future course of action and then stick to it. But one thing is for sure, they cannot leave it till too late.
Absolutely. So, one of the questions that have come for you in the comment section here is it time to groom bowlers like maybe Tyagi, Hangarkekar, Umran Malik? Is it time to give them a bigger role in the team?
Yes, Umran Malik has impressed everybody with whatever he's done. Yes, he might have gone for a few runs, but obviously you need somebody who can bowl really quick. And if he perhaps picks up the trick to make the ball reverse, then it'll be even more useful, because later on in the subcontinent, especially in the pitches that we get to play on India, there is a possibility that reverse can happen. But that's a craft that is picked up with a lot of experience. If he can go on to pick it up sooner than expected, then I think that'll be a big boost to the entire bowling lineup. Ashdeep looks really good in terms of temperament and in terms of the ability as well. And what he's also impressed everybody with is his ability to learn quickly. He went for a few runs in the earlier outing, but whatever little we saw of him today, he was really impressive in terms of exactly knowing what to do and how to go about it. It's not about knowing what to do, it's about implementing what it is that you plan to do. And Ashdeep has been really good in implementing his plans. Yes, as far as grooming bowlers are concerned, you need to, because suddenly it looks like we are running short of bowling options. It's always good to have a lot of bench strength as far as bowling is concerned, because over a long period of time, I've seen that batters come through regardless whether you really do something about it or not. But you need to do something really proactive in terms of developing a bowling pool, because it's so easy for bowlers to fall on the wayside. It's because they could probably get injured, or they could probably lose their craft suddenly, or they could suddenly lose form. So it's a case of you always on the lookout for bowlers, and also keep an eye on what's happening as far as the first class cricket is concerned. You got to look for real talent and see how you're going to nurture and ensure that the talent is not underutilized.
Absolutely. When we talk about multiple formats, of course, now the next World Cup is an ODI World Cup, but tests and T20s will continue to keep going. And in this sort of a sense, I think Rishabh Pant now coming and saying that he prefers to open in T20s obviously poses another option for the team, which has been looking a different way at least so far. What do you make of that voicing of an opinion that Pant has done? What do you think? You spoke about him being a potential opening option during the World Cup, but do you still see it that way?
What is important here is how Pant is seen by the team management. It's not about a player wanting to do certain role. It's about what the team management expects of him, what it is that they think that he can do for the team. Because at the end of the day, um, the player has to fit into the role that the team wants him to perform, and that way it's better. Because otherwise, what happens is every individual will go on exhibiting his kind of preference, and then there's no end to it. But if the team management feels that he can be a better option at the top of the order rather than towards the end of the innings, and if they're prepared to take that gambit, why not? Because he is capable of playing aggressive cricket against the faster bowlers. And if he also is inclined towards doing it for the team at the top of the order, so be it. As long as the team management also is bought into his idea.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that in terms of just how the team management views Rishabh Pant as a player, because we've seen another player who's just been in and out of the team, which is Sanju Samson. What have you made of that? Social media seems to love debating Sanju Samson, whether he needs to be in or out of the team, or whether it's unfair that he isn't getting as many opportunities. How do you look at this?
It could be Ishan Kishan, Rishabh Pant, Sanju Samson, whoever it may be. What is critical here is for that particular talent to be given a string of chances, because it's not going to do any good to anybody if guys are played sporadically. If they're going to be playing two games and then suddenly they're dropped and then suddenly they're brought back. What it does is that not only does it spoil the rhythm of a player, it also affects a player as far as the mental side of things is concerned. And unless you see somebody, particularly over a period of time in a string of games, it's very difficult for the people to assess a cricketer. And even for a cricketer to realize what it is that he has to do better to sustain his success in international cricket or find a recipe to succeed in international cricket. So the important thing here is that it's all about providing a string of chances as far as the number is concerned, whether it's 5 games, 10 games on the trot, or 15 games on the trot. That's up to the team management and also dependent on the schedule that they have. But the long and short of it is that a string of chances will help everybody concerned to assess better.
Absolutely. Now, you had mentioned that selection committee is going to get a little bit of a makeover in a couple of days. Any reason why, or maybe a better way to ask this would be, have you ever been interested in taking up that job? Because in one of our earlier episodes, you have only expressed respect for the amount of criticism that the selection committee usually cops. So, have you ever considered taking that up?
See, there are various things that one can do, but the important thing is that as to at what stage of your life do you want to do things, and the other question that begs to be answered is whether you're wanted or whether you would have a reasonable chance. So that being the case, it's a tough call to make either way, whether to throw your hat into the ring or refrain from doing it. So at this point, I felt that maybe I may not perhaps uh, get a chance to have that privilege, and that's the reason I didn't apply for it. And there are many ways of looking at it. There's no particular reason as to why I didn't apply. Primarily, I feel that there's no point in trying to throw a hat into the ring, for the sake of it, unless I always felt that I should probably apply for anything or look for anything when I felt there was a reasonable chance. And I didn't particularly get that particular gut feeling, and that's the reason I didn't apply.
Fair enough. But as far as the job itself is concerned, we have a 5 year cap, isn't it, on the kind of time that you need before you can actually apply to become a selector. Given how fast the game is evolving, what do you think about this 5 year cap? Is it necessary to wait for somebody to finish 5 years post retirement, or should that be reconsidered perhaps?
I would even say 7 years for the simple reason. What happens is if somebody is going to become a selector to 2 years immediately after retirement, what happens is that you would have been playing with most of them. And you don't know what kind of equations you had with quite a lot of players there, and whether you will be tempted to do something which you would not do when time heals a lot of things. And even if you've been overly friendly with a few guys, you might perhaps tend to be in favor of those guys when you're a selector. So, 5 years or 7 years. What happens is that Let's say a cricketer has played all formats of the game. He's played a lot of years of IPL, and it shouldn't matter if it's 5, 7 years. Yes, so if you're talking about a lot of years since the retirement of a player, that's a different story altogether. But if somebody has been in touch with the game until let's say 5 years ago or 7 years ago, or whatever, I think it shouldn't make any difference because not too many things are going to change as far as the assessment part of a cricketer is concerned. A selector needs to see the kind of talent that is available, and he also needs to try and see as to who it is who's capable of fitting into the side. And more or less, all these decisions are dictated by the gaps that there is in the team at any given point in time. The selector is only going to fill up those gaps based on what is happening at a certain point in time. And more than selecting a player, I think the selectors generally are there to drop the players, to quote Anil Kumble a couple of years ago. That was his view. And that also has a kind of merit to it in the way he expressed it. It's not that he was trying to sort of have a go at selectors. It's just that what he was trying to say was that the players more or less sometimes pick themselves with extraordinary performances, and of course, some of them pick themselves with extraordinary talent apart from their performances. So these things, yes, are primarily, as I said earlier, dictated by what exactly the needs of the team are.
Fair enough. Now, if you look at the individual players themselves, we see, like, for instance, these cases where players maybe don't get an opportunity or the bench strength is so strong that someone doesn't consistently get opportunities in a team. Now, there is a recent report, a FICA report, which says 49% of international cricketers are ready to reject national central contracts for T20 leagues. Now, obviously, this doesn't include Indian cricketers because they don't come under the ambit of that organization. But what do you make of this? We're seeing so many cricketers like in New Zealand, Guptill, Bolt, all of these guys have asked to be released so that they can go and play domestic cricket outside or league cricket outside. What do you sort of make of that shift in priorities as far as cricketers are concerned? This was discussed with Chaminda Vas for those who want to go back to that episode. But your thoughts on it, sir?
It's always a personal choice because individual will be in a better position to decide as to the lifespan that he has in cricket. And if you are talking about people taking this route in other countries, there's no way anybody can be stopped because there are strict laws that protect the interest of the sports persons. And that's the reason the administrators also do not really object. And if there is a choice, anybody would want to make a choice. So who's giving them the choice? It's the administrators all over the world who start various formats of this game and who also start the various leagues. So when the options are available, cricketers are going to see what they feel is the best option for them to pursue and then take a call. So this is something that is going to happen more and more frequently in the future, and there is nothing anybody can do about it. It's totally left to the cricketers as to the kind of options that they need to pursue because they take a lot of things into consideration. Like, for example, if somebody has performed really well, let's say, for example, 10, 12 years of international cricket, and then a cricketer feels that he's not going to be really going through the rigors again of having to deal with various kinds of pressures, and if he feels that there's enough money for him to make playing just the various leagues across the world where there's relatively less pressure. Yes, obviously, if you don't perform in those leagues, yes, it's a matter of professional and personal pride and maybe a loss of a few $1,000s or a few hundreds of thousands of dollars. But otherwise, you're not necessarily subjected to the kind of various pressures that you are made to go through when you play for an international side.
Right, absolutely. And the flip of that is something that we can maybe see in the domestic setup. Like we are speaking about players who are maybe for whatever reason looking to play outside. Now, in if you look at the IPL context itself, there was this initial trend of maybe us looking for very high profile foreign coaches, like for instance, a Ricky Ponting or even McCullum, for instance, all of these guys coming into each of these IPL franchises. But an interesting development has been Chandrakant Pandit's appointment by KKR. We know his domestic record. He's a very proven stalwart in the domestic scene in India. Is there a shift where we're looking for more accomplished homegrown coaches? Is that a fair? No, I wouldn't say generalization, but a fair statement to make.
You have to reframe that question at the start. I think you said we were looking. Is it a case of were looking? I don't think so. We still are, and we'll continue to look for coaches from other countries. As far as Chandrakant Pandit is concerned, it's going to be an interesting challenge for him because he's got a tremendous record as a coach in domestic cricket. It's a new kind of format for him. It's a kind of new environment for him because he's dealt with first class cricketers where he's not really had to deal with cricketers from other countries, a multicultural environment. And of course, the entire dynamics of IPL is different. It's going to be an interesting challenge. It's a good start because this will provide a lot of hope for all the coaches who are very committed to their uh, coaching gigs in domestic cricket. It'll give them a lot of hope. And what is also important for the Indian coaches that are on the circuit to understand is that you need to bide your time, prove yourself before you get those gigs. You're not going to be handed those gigs because the franchisees uh, go really deep into various things in terms of their decision making. So they got to ensure that they produce a lot of good results. Good results, not necessarily titles. They kind of create a good reputation with themselves in terms of their work ethics, in terms of how they do their things, and in terms of their coaching philosophies and methodology. So before they really just take this route of yes, Indian coaches have to be made coaches of IPL franchises. No, that is not the kind of thing that they should be looking at. They got to try and understand the fact that what the franchisees are looking for is totally different when it comes to IPL coaching gigs.
Hmm. And since we're talking about domestic cricket, I think one thing that we'll have to ask you about is something that Dinesh Karthik tweeted about maybe about a week or 10 days back as well. We saw Jagadishan getting to a record score, Tamil Nadu making a record total, and sort of trampling all over Arunachal Pradesh. How do you see these games, sir? We've constantly spoken about this sort of a lopsided affair when it comes to maybe, and I hate using this word, but weaker teams, if you look at just how they're placed in each of these tournaments. How do you look at this kind of a matchup? Do you think Northeastern teams or these teams that are still sort of up and coming should have a separate group of their own? Without meaning to be disrespectful about this at all, but how did you sort of look at this Jagadishan episode from last week? With all due respect to his knock and what he managed to do on the field.
You cannot discredit his performances because it's not his fault as to what kind of a day an opposition side is having or what kind of strength they have and what kind of weaknesses they have. You cannot really discredit any performances. As far as this particular argument of yes, all these teams belonging to one particular group, this is something which has been said repeatedly. But I suppose it also becomes very difficult once you opened out, once you made them compete in the open cluster, if I can use that terminology. Yeah, once you made them compete with the rest of the other teams without them belonging to a separate group, it's going to be very difficult to try and get that going because there'll be objections. It'll be deemed perhaps as an implied insult, and I don't think it's an easy decision for the administrators to make. If it were to be done, it perhaps should have been done at the start, wherein they could have all been put together in one particular group with a promotion demotion happening from to other groups if a side tops that group or a side from the other group which is had a bad year could perhaps be demoted into this particular thing like they had the plate and elite. But again, various tweaks have been resorted to. We'll have to wait and see if this is something that will be done. But as far as the cricketers are concerned, you cannot really sort of be critical or perhaps disregard what it is that they do. Yes, you are welcome to try and give lesser weightage to those performances. But if a cricketer, along with these performances, if he is going to do really well against all other teams in a season, we should not let this particular notion affect our assessment of a cricketer.
Right, fair enough. So, larger picture now, as things stand, we've got a lot of interesting cricket happening around the place. We've got the women's under 19 team that's currently playing in Bombay. Besides that, we also have England and Pakistan sort of taking each other on in test matches after a very, very long time. Now, England, obviously, we've had a lot of eyeballs on their coaching decisions. We've had Matthew Mott, who we scrutinized for a very long time, and he came away with that World Cup win. Now, what do you think about baseball in Pakistan conditions? Do you think he's going to have as much of a run riot as he's managed before with this team, especially in conditions that are not familiar, or rather that familiar to them?
It's going to be a very good challenge for the England side. Yes, they do have tremendous flexibility. Ben Stokes, as an all-rounder, gives great flexibility, and also the keeper there works again. He's also going to provide a lot of options. And interestingly, they're playing Liam Livingston as well. He's a terrific striker of the ball, but bowls useful spinners. Yes, he can bowl a bit of offies and a bit of leggies. So they are banking on their all-round talent, providing a lot of balance, and that is something that they think will suffice even in Test cricket. But they'll be up against a terrific attack that Pakistan has, and especially if the ball starts reversing, it can be a big challenge for the England side. Again, if you look at it, they do have a little bit of a chink in the armor with this top order not being really settled. Yes, they're banking a lot on Crawley. They've been giving him a lot of chances. As Ollie Pope is back into the side, that's going to lend some kind of solidity because he's been a good player. So you'll have to wait and see. This baseball stuff is fine, but the thing is that as they play different countries and as they play more and more, they're going to be really sort of countered by other nations as well. Because the beauty of international cricket is that it's a question of trap, escape, counter trap, counter escape, which means that whatever it is that you do in one particular series and succeed with whatever it is that you've done, seemingly, which is absolutely alien and new, which takes the opposition by surprise. Obviously, the other sides will keep a note of this and try and see how best they can counter whatever it is that you throw at them. So that's the beauty of international cricket. So two good nations, they're playing each other against each other after a long time, and the Pakistan side will be really revved up because they're getting to play international cricket at home now. They have a lot of support, which means that they can be potentially one and a half side that it normally is because of all the encouragement and the support they'll get and the inspiration that they'll gain by virtue of having some cricket at home.
Right, absolutely. And so the interesting part, of course, is England has now two coaches, two captains. Is that something that India can sort of, take a page from their book from? Because we've been talking about first the fact that we can't have two white ball captains. Now there's been rumors of maybe potentially having a separate T20 and a separate ODI captain. How do you look at this debate? Are we just jumping on the bandwagon because things are not going our way?
Yes, it's always well and good to try and think ahead and try and see if we can sort of break the monotony or try and be innovative. But what is important here is that whatever it is that we are contemplating and whatever decision we are heading towards should have some strong rationale. And it also should be stemming from a real need that it is required. If it is not required, if you are going to be indulging in being with the Joneses, I don't think that's the right course of action. If there is a real need, or if you have two captains who are going to be really good in a split setup, then by all means go for it. But if it's just a question of us trying to jump on the bandwagon, as you said, I don't think I would probably sort of advocate it. But if there is a real need and if you're going to really split the sides as well, then it's fine.
Right, absolutely. And talking about Test cricket, India also gets back into the Test scheme of things, especially as far as the World Test Championship is concerned. Is this sort of a final chance, so to speak, for Pujara? given everything that's happening, given the number of people who are now raising their hands and saying, we can be picked as well. Do you see this as like one last audition for him? This cycle, at least, the cycle that's coming up?
See, anybody who's going to play only one format of the game is going to be under tremendous pressure. It could be Test cricket, it could be just ODI, it could be just the T20 format. If any cricketer is going to be playing for his country in just one format, he's going to be under a lot of pressure because it's not easy to play one particular format and perform all the time. Because the moment you have a few failures, when I say a few, I'm talking about two, three here. If you have two, three failures, then you'll suddenly be influenced by the fact that you need to try and make a change here because X is performing well in another format. Maybe because of the form that he is in, we can try him in this format. Kind of thought process will creep in slowly. So that's the reason for anyone playing just one particular format is a very, very difficult job. And Pujara is obviously one who's done extraordinarily well playing just Test cricket in the last few years. But even for him, with all that he's done in terms of doing the things that he's done at number three for India in Test cricket under tough conditions and even playing abroad, he's always going to be under pressure. I think by now he's got used to it. He'll probably go out to bat thinking this is my last innings, let me have a good time kind of mindset. And he's experienced enough. Yes, he's also aware. And we'll have to wait and see. We'll also have to respect the kind of performances that he's churned out. And it'll all boil down to what exactly is the conversation that is perhaps been going on or is likely to go on between Dravid and Pujara.
Right, absolutely. And as far as we're looking at big tournaments, another big one that's coming our way is the Women's Under 19 T20 World Cup in January. And the girls, the Indian team, South African team, New Zealand team, they're all in Mumbai and they're playing a couple of games against each other. Have you had some time to catch up on what's happening there?
Unfortunately, no. But what I can say is that it's the start of a great journey for a lot of young girls in this country. Because until now, perhaps they may not have had enough opportunities to play a lot of cricket, let alone international cricket. But with the Under 19 World Cup kicking off, it was supposed to start a couple of years ago, but due to the pandemic, it didn't. But now that it's going to get going, I think a lot of young girls will obviously be really pumped up to play cricket and they'll get a lot more opportunities. And this will also thrust upon the development of cricket for girls at the grassroots level because once you have an under 19 World Cup happening, you need to try and ensure that you provide a lot of opportunities along with the infrastructure for these kids to go and play cricket. You will see a lot of centers springing up, hopefully, because unlike the boys, the girls cannot travel too far and be away from their homes for too long. So, hopefully, there'll be a lot more centers that will be put up for these girls to have a chance of going and developing their skills.
Right. And it's interesting, sir, because one of the questions we have here is regarding women's cricket. Since you coach the team, can you tell us why the team lacks power hitters and fast bowling bench strength? If you, I mean, you have addressed this multiple times, especially in the Asian Games, I'm saying Asian Cup thing that we spoke about a little earlier. But Ashwini, if you want to check out, if you look at how the under 19 girls are playing, their strike rates are quite commendable. And there are a couple of pacers like Hurley Gala who've consistently taken about 3-4 wickets per game. So just check out the scorecards, and if you're based in Bombay, try and make it to BKC and just check out the games. They happen, I think, every alternate day or so. We've discussed a lot of things. I think we've taken 40 minutes of your time. We don't want to delay you for your flight, sir. Thank you.
Just
Yes.
finishing off that, just answering that question,
Yes.
we don't lack power hitters. We do have some really big hitters, starting with
Absolutely.
the captain Harmanpreet. We got obviously Shafali Verma, even Smriti Mandana can get runs at a quick pace. You got Navgire, you got Pooja Vasraka. I don't think India lacks firepower now in terms of batting. It's just that sometimes they don't click together as a unit.
Right.
Once that starts happening, I think India will be as aggressive or as much as a threat as any other side. And in terms of fast bowling, also we've not done badly in the recent past. Pooja Vastrakar, once again, is bowling far better in the last 18 months or so. And then you got Renuka, who's done a great job here. And there's nothing really that you lack as far as this current Indian team is concerned. It's just that for some reason, they've not been clicking together as a unit or at times. It's not that they've been doing badly as well. They've done well enough. It's just a case of them somehow managing to keep up the consistency as a unit rather than, a few doing well and the others not supporting well enough. So that is something that will happen if all of them play together consistently over a period of time.
Absolutely. And one opportunity for us to see whether this works, whether they click, is in December when they take on Australia at home. So let's see what happens there. Obviously, we'll catch up with WE Sir about that as well, because he knows both these sides in and out when it comes to their strengths and weaknesses. So that'll be a nice conversation for us to have closer to that series. So we've taken about 40 minutes of your time. Thank you so much for very candidly answering all of our questions this time. Next week, in case you guys are not
What
aware
do you
of the
mean this
format,
time? I always answer candidly.
of oh yeah,
No, I'm
yeah.
just
No
teasing.
taking
I'm
credit
just
away.
teasing.
Absolutely, you're always candid with your answers. That I will not take away from you. But we'll have another interesting episode coming up next week because it's an interview segment coming from you. I can't wait to see who you have on the show next week. For anybody else who's watching this, please go back and see the episodes, see all of the interview segments, especially that WE Sir has done with a number of very illustrious guests from the cricketing ecosystem. That'll keep you going until we come back with a fresh episode next Wednesday. Thank you, sir. Have a safe flight, and we will see you next Wednesday.
You're welcome. I enjoyed this quite a lot. And as far as our viewers are concerned, until I catch up with you next week, be good and take care.